Olá, sejam todos muito bem-vindos ao canal do YouTube do Adestramento Brasil. Eu sou Roberta Prescott, editora do site, e hoje eu converso com a amazona holandesa, que também foi técnica do time de adestramento para equestre da Holanda e é juíza de adestramento, além de competir no nível de grande prêmio. Seja muito bem-vinda, Joyce Heuitink. A entrevista vai ser em inglês, porque ela está na Holanda, e depois, para quem quiser, vai ter matéria no site com os principais trechos produzidos. Hello, Joyce, welcome. It's very nice to have you here at Adestramento Brasil.
Hi.
So Thank you. I do appreciate that. So just to start, I give a little introduction in Portuguese about your career, but I think it would be very nice if you could summarize some highlights about when you start writing and how you end up being a dressage writer, a coach for para-dressage team, and also an international judge.
Well, like in short, from my 16th until my 21st, I was in the Dutch junior and young rider team. We did 6 European championships and won 8 medals. That was the time that you could only win 1 individual medal and 1 team medal, because nowadays you can win 2 individual medals, like 1 in the individual test and 1 in the freestyle. So I think that was a nice achievement, and I was very proud of that, of course. And in the meantime, I developed myself into a trainer as well. I train several riders up to Grand Prix level, also international, and became the Paralympic coach for Holland. That was back in 2013. And in the meantime, I'm one of the few people that does competing and coaching as national coach at the same time, because I still compete at Grand Prix level myself too. Yeah.
Wow, that's a lot. So, well, let's come back as your career as a young rider in the Dutch team. In Brazil, we do have international competitions, but we don't see a lot of juniors or young riders competing here. What is the importance of doing those FIA levels and competing on those categories?
Well, I think it's very important to get like experience at international shows, but then when you're young, then you have the ultimate experience of also what it is like to represent your country. Because I can imagine when you live in South America, then there is a few international championships, of course, but here we only have the Europeans, and then if you can represent your country, it's, well, first of all, it's important for us. And you learn so much. Like, there's pressure, and especially if you're picked as the last one, so then you have to make sure you write the best performance, so everybody knows that you might be aiming for a medal as a team, and that when you're the last one, it might be gold or silver, and you learn a lot from that. And I think that contributes also when you start competing in international Grand Prix and you represent your country in the Nations Cup, for example, or in a big championship even. Yeah.
And what do you think during the whole time competing was the most difficult jump to do? I mean, the changing of categories and from small tour to big tour. What do you think was the most difficulties that you faced?
Oh yeah, that's absolutely the most difficult one. We always say in Holland, like, if you do like normal competitions with a bit of half pass, shoulder in, and things like that, then you still have to have the big step towards a good flying change. Once your horse can do a good flying change and understands the meaning of collection, then it's not so easy to get a good piaffe and passage too. So a horse can be a super small tour horse, but it's not always a good Grand Prix horse too. And then it's also like you can do it at home, but then you need to do it in a competition with pressure. Well, if you can do that, you're one of the best in the world, I think.
And what do you think does it take to a horse to do this jump? I mean, from small tour to big tour.
Well, first of all, they need to have like a big heart, because you ask a lot from them. Of course, you ask it like, it has to be reasonable, and you have to keep the welfare of the horse in mind. So for me, that's, the most important thing, that you take time with the horse to develop everything. And when the horse is willing to understand it, then it's nice when they have like, for me, I love a horse with a compact body, so not so long. For example, the horses that you got in Brazil, like the Lusitanos, and that's the type of horse that I like because they're so compact. Yeah. And they need to have the technique. We usually work with warm blood horses, and they do not automatically have the technique to collect and to sit as much as they need to do in a good piaffe and passage.
And talking about Lusitanos, as you mentioned they are very compact, and we are seeing some Lusitanos competing, being very competitive in the Grand Prix, including making some scores about 75, 80%. Do you have you followed Lusitano around the years? How do you see the development of this breed?
Well, to be honest, like my first experience with good Lusitanos was in Brazil when I was teaching Teresa Almeida. And of course, they have like nice Lusitano horses and representing the team and in championships. And over here, I got to know Maria Caetano. We have the same trainer, Ton de Ridder. And well, of course, I followed her results. And I think her horse is like one of a kind. It's very interesting to see how those horses developed over the years, and that they got like more self-carriage, more suppleness, and more like off the ground movement, and so nice to see. Absolutely, so harmonious.
And what are the main difference between riding a Lusitano and a warm blood like you have in Europe? I mean,
well, like
highs, ups and downs, right?
I find the most challenging thing, I do not ride Lusitanos very often, just every now and then, because I have a few students that have one. For me, it's like the most difficult thing with them is to get them into the rein and get a nice contact so they stretch into the bit, because they're so compact. On the other hand, as I said, I love compact horses. My warm bloods are also compact, so I have, if I have it, then I have the same issue with them. So I quite well know how to solve it and get them going. So yeah, I think it's a nice challenge.
And tell me a little bit more about your riding today. So you are competing with which horses, and how was your daily work with them?
Well, my daily work with my horses, I only have one horse at the moment. I had a few more the past few years. I decided to sell the young ones that I thought were not comparable enough to my Grand Prix horse that I have now. So I have my 9-year-old offspring of Apache, and he's called Gaudi Vita. And my daily routine is I start him in the morning at 7:30. That's usually the time that I start working. And then I ride a few clients' horses. Around lunchtime, I teach my working students. And after that, I teach people from outside. So it can be anyone, like a parallel rider or eventing rider or Grand Prix rider or junior, whatever. And mostly in the evenings, I do video lessons all over the world, also depending on where people live. For example, with Brazil, with South America, some countries like Colombia, for example, Northern America, and also, for example, South Africa. So that's nice. Yeah.
And talking a little bit more about your coaching and teaching, what kind of tip, what kind of advice can you do for amateurs? I mean, I'm assuming that you can teach for just entry level to high level. So, what are the most difficult things do you think people always are committing? Some mistakes that are the same?
Well, I think for me, it's very important that no matter what level you ride, that at least you work with a plan. For example, every day when I get on my horse, I have a plan what I'm going to do. And of course, the plan can change depending on how the horse feels like. But if you just get on and just do something, it's usually not improving the rest of your work. And I focus a lot on basics, and I try to feel little details that are different. Like if something doesn't work out, you can do it over and over again. But if you find out after 2 times that it's not working, then I always try something different. And it can be completely out of the box, can be completely different from what I did before. And then sometimes you realize that it's the one hand or the leg, or it's the shape of the figure that you try to do, or it's the activity. It can be something small. It can feel like a detail, but then in the meantime, it's so big to change. And usually when you're able to step like away from yourself a little bit, then it's much easier to find a solution. And even if you compete at the lowest level, that doesn't matter.
And when you say a plan, you mean like you have a daily plan, like I'm doing this, and this with the horse, and you also think in a weekly and a month basis?
Yeah, like
how do you plan all that? I mean, I want to get that this level, so I'm doing you stepping back, or
well, first of all, I think it's important to train at least one level higher than that you're competing at the moment. Because if you compete and you think you're good enough, for your level that you're competing at now, and you want to move on to the next level and you do not master the exercises of the next level yet, then you always face problems in the ring. It always at least takes like 3 to 6 months to show a confirmed result. Like if you can do your flying changes at home, it doesn't mean you can do them in the test at a competition. That takes time. So that's why, for example, I train those changes. I start training them quite early, and not just when I think I'm going to do it next week, So that's part of my plan. If I know that I have competitions, then I work towards the competition. I start training the test, for example, or parts of the test. I do it at a different location. So I get used to the circumstances to feel the horse is different, or if I'm different. And then within the week, if you have a lesson scheduled with your trainer, to me, like I would never give my horse like 1 or 2 days off before I have a lesson. So I work towards the lesson, and also increase the workload so he will be fine in the training. And then after the training, I take like a day that's like easy work, and so the body can, like as an athlete, the body can get used to increase of workload and also have a nice cooling down period.
Oh, that sounds great, and that's really something important to take to have in mind, right? And I'm not sure if all riders have a plan like this into the mind when they are go to the ring, right?
Yeah, well, and even like at a competition, I have a plan for the warm-up. I have a plan what I'm gonna do when I enter the ring. Like, do I go left or right? And do I go walk, trot, or canter? Do I do maybe do I go extended trot or extended canter? Is that necessary? Or do I have to do a halt to calm my horse down? So I think that's like, if you want to have a good result, then you cannot just enter the ring and then make up your mind, shall I go left or right? And because then always things happen that you don't expect.
And this confidence is also important, right? So to know exactly what you're doing, because dressage is much based on details.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
And you also were a coach for para dressage. How was that? And in which way para dressage is different? Of course, there are a lot of difference, but I guess there we have some point. We can point some differences and similarities between those.
Well, like the similarities is that riding, it still has to look the same. It has to look harmonious, active, with a nice contact. It has to have a light contact, and the exercises that you do have to be performed as good as possible. I mean, the halt has to be square, and the transitions have to be fluent. And in the higher grades where you have to show collection, the collection has to be the same. The bending in the lateral movements has to be the same as in other levels. I mean, the half pass doesn't look different from a half pass in small tour. The main difference is that people have disabilities. That's why it's called para dressage. And for me, the way it's most different is that I cannot train somebody to say exactly what he has to do. So I cannot say, put your leg on to go forward. Because if somebody has no legs, it's quite complicated. So what I do is I give my my directions to the rider by saying, like, make your horse go forward, and then they know what to do. If they don't know what to do, I give them suggestions. So I can say, like, either like you can use your whip if you have no legs, for example, or your seat, or your voice. There's always something that you can teach your horse to react on, and that way you can teach your horse to do basically anything. Because I have riders with one leg that can do 15 1/10s, and they have taught the horse themselves.
Wow. Yeah, that's incredible. We have one questions related to para dressage for the audience. Hi, Joyce. What do you think of the current FEI para dressage classification systems? And what do you think is the more important for Brazil to develop its para equestrian based?
Well, first of all, those grades have been there very long. I mean, there's grades 1 up to 5. 1 is a grade that only does walk, for example, the people with the biggest disabilities, the most disabilities. And grade 5 is the riders that have a minor disability, but it can still, a minor disability can still be missing one hand, one arm, or one leg. So that's still quite severe. I can understand for the audience that people that have a part of their body that is there, that people can see, but doesn't work, that it looks like unfair competition, for example. Because if one of my legs is not functioning, or my hand is totally not functioning, but it is there, then it looks like I can do more than the person that doesn't have the arm or the leg. So I think the classification system is quite fair. I mean, there's always, with 1 or 2 riders in the world, no matter which Paralympic sport, there's always a reason to doubt. But then I think, okay, there's people that have judged upon these disabilities, and these people get checked over and over again. So we have to trust that. As riders, as trainers and coaches, and judges, we have to trust the system. Otherwise, you cannot work in it. So that's what I do. And after the Tokyo Paralympics, the whole classification system will change. I don't know exactly how. We will only get to know that next year. Yeah, so that's the most thing. And what was your second question again? Because then that one I forgot.
It's what do you think is the most important for Brazil to develop its para equestrian base?
Oh, please do not develop more, because your country is getting better and better. No, for example, Rodolfo Riscala is a good friend of mine. I got to know him in Brazil when I was teaching in Brazil, before he got disabled, and when he was still riding small tour and Grand Prix, I think with Nilo. And yeah, so he is doing a fantastic job. And also, one of your lower grade riders, I forgot the name of this guy. He rides so well. I think he does grade 1 or 2. He got 2 medals, I think, in Rio in the Paralympics. Well,
Sergio.
Yeah. I mean, he's got a fantastic horse, and I think most of them are trained in France by Nicolas. And it's difficult to find good horses. We all try to find the best horse for our nation, but I think Nicolas is doing a great job with them. And of course, Rodolfo has found an amazing sponsor, and with the support of his family, he's hard to beat.
Do you think in para dressage the horse plays a bigger role? I mean, because it should be a very quiet, a very calm horse, right? In some levels, of course.
Yeah, especially in grade 1. And also a little bit in grade 2, because in grade 1, if the horse starts trotting, you have a big problem. It has to be like a big, relaxed, nice walk with a good use of the body, very supple, nice overtrack, in a very consistent tempo. So it cannot be a lazy horse, because if you have to start using the whip, for example, to get it forward, you always get a little mistake in the rhythm, and that brings down the harmony. So you don't want that. And then from that on, you actually want horses that could be ridden by able-bodied riders as well. You want the horse with that right amount of temperature, that if you use your voice, like, then he will move forward. just like a horse if you do a small tour. And they need to be active enough to show collection, active enough to have a good extended trot, for example, or a medium trot, or if you do grade 2 or 3, just lengthen the stride.
You were a para dressage coach, if I'm not wrong, 2013, right?
Yes.
What has changed, and do you think the para dressage has evolved since then?
Well, it has changed a lot. Even if I look at my own team or my own country, when I started, like to become a team member, you had to score like between 68 and 71%. Nowadays, my best 6 to 7 riders score consistently over 73, consistently at every show. And well, sometimes goes not so good, but you know.
Yeah, okay, I got an idea.
Yeah, and at the championships, they score in the normal tests up to 77, and in the freestyle over 80. Yeah, so when I became the coach, if somebody had 70%, he had a medal. So that was something. So it got much better, the level of the horses increased tremendously. There's a couple of horses that I wish I had in my stable. Like they have 3 super paces. And when I began as a coach, we were happy that we had sweet horses that were easy to ride and had nice movements. Well, nowadays you need super horses with a good temperament and have to look pretty, and it has to have the whole package. Yeah, so that's
no, go ahead.
No, that's the biggest change. And also, like if you compare it to the World Equestrian Games and Tryon, they're in grade like 3 and 4. There is like 5 to 8 riders that can win a medal. And it's not because the level is so average. That's because worldwide, the level is so incredibly high. And whereas before, I think the main contestants came from, well, it was always Great Britain. Great Britain had never lost the team gold medal since 1990. So every European Championship, World Championship, or Paralympic Games, they won the team gold, except from 18 and 19, because then we won it. So that's the first change. And we were happy about that. And then when I began as a coach, then it was Germany, Denmark, and yeah, so that was a little bit like the fellow countries that were competing for a medal. Nowadays, it's Brazil that's winning medals individually, and because the team result is, well, you count them together, the individual results, you count them together and it becomes a team result. If you have like 2 or 3 very good riders that win an individual medal, in other words, if Brazil finds the 3rd rider that wins an individual medal, they might win a team medal. That's how good Brazil got. And also the USA is amazing at the moment.
And do you think this high level in scores also happen in dressage? Because I was comparing some Olympic grades and scores from, I don't know, like 5 Olympics back and to now, and the grades like, wow.
Yeah, I think that's also the case. I also looked it up quite some years ago because I was looking at the results of our Dutch riders, and it went back to like Sydney and then Athens. And well, yeah, if you got like 75%, you might win a medal. You know, it was like in the special, for example, and in the freestyle it went up to 80. And nowadays, if you get 75 in the special, then no, in the Grand Prix, then you qualify for the special. I had one of my students asking, like, if I want to qualify at the Olympics for the second day, now we start with the specials, for the second day, how much do I need to score? I said, well, 75, because that's the level at the moment. Yeah. And yeah, it goes up to over 90 in the freestyle. And I think, well, you see better horses, but you also see better riding. Especially the last 4, 5, 6, 7 years, more harmony. It looks much easier, more consistent, so light and elegant. And to be honest, I love to watch it nowadays. Yeah.
And
I wish I could ride like that.
And why do you think it happens? I mean, do you think it's technique has improved? I mean, there are more conscious or more talent people. What makes?
I think it's the total picture. Well, first of all, you see more riders that are able to find the right resources to make it up to good Grand Prix level. More people are willing to move, for example, like willing to move within America to go to like either Florida or California. People from Southern America, they move to either America or they go to Europe to compete, to compare. Yeah, and if you go out of your home country where maybe with 69% you win, and you go to Europe or America and with 69 you do not win a ribbon, then of course you want to improve. And well, for example, Maria has showed that you don't need another breed of horse. You can also do it with Lusitano and some other riders. Yeah, so I think the level just got very high, and there's more good horses. They're trained better. We have more knowledge of, we do a lot of research on health and things like that, how we can keep the horses sound. Do we have to treat them with certain things to keep them happy? Do we have to put them in the field, or, like the whole management is much better. And yeah, the grounds are better that we ride on, for example. So yeah, I think it's the whole package.
And also the CDIs are becoming more competitive, right? So you have more qualified. Yeah. Which CDI that you compete that you remember most? I know you were in Aachen. And
yeah, that's the one,
that?
of course. Yes, Aachen was last year, and it was my second time. Back in 2002, when I was 21, it was the first time that I competed in a small tour. And last year I got an invitation, and that was very rare because in Aachen you can only compete when you have a Grand Prix horse, and Aachen only takes in the best of the best. That's what they always say. So if you can ride Grand Prix and get 64, they do not enter you. And I did not have a Grand Prix horse at the moment. I had a very successful small tour horse who's now competing Grand Prix, and he was actually not beaten at the international level up to then. He had won all his competitions with scores. If I had a bad day, he had 71, and if I had a good day, he had 75 in the normal test, up to 80 in the freestyle, and also in competitive fields. So that was very nice. So they let me compete there to show, yeah, my horse and myself to the audience, and that was such a big honor. And he dealt with the circumstances very well. And well, there was only one little problem, and that was that Charlotte Fry with Glamourdale, the world champion of the 7-year-olds back then, was competing too. And she beat me with like 5% in every test. So when I had 74, she had 79, for example. So she was from another planet. And I was very, very proud with my second places.
And I didn't get, in which level did you compete?
I competed in the small tour. So it was Prix St. George and Intermedia 1.
Yeah.
That's why it was so unique that they invited me. Because I was the first one ever for Holland that could only compete small tour.
Oh, that's good. And how do you deal with, you said, oh, she beat at me, she was 79, I was 74. That is something sometimes really difficult for those who are starting to enter into a ring and to be judged by 3 to 5 judges. How do you deal with that? And when you were teaching or when you were coaching, what kind of message do you try to pass to your students and also yourself?
Well, for myself, it was not a problem at all, because I know that she rides extremely well, and her horse is an extremely good horse. And I know that when she rides a mistake-free test, that she will beat me. And that's got nothing to do with judges or something. And I think it's just like with athletics or swimming, like if somebody is just better than you got to accept it. For example, if you get a personal best, but the other one gets a world record, then somebody's better than you. And so for myself, I always try to have my best performance possible. And if I'm able to do mistake-free tests with a good feeling and a nice harmony, then I'm happy. And you cannot help what the judges think of you. I mean, if I start worrying about that, then I better not go. So that's what I try to explain to my students as well. And what I also try to teach them is do not judge judges. So, and especially not in social media, because I read that a lot. And then they write in a competition and they had like 72 and 65%. And then they have to write on the internet, yeah, the one judge gave me 72 and the other one only had me 65. I do not understand that. And I try to teach them that it might look different from a different angle. And if you're good enough, then judges will not have such a big difference in their opinion. Because if it's good, then it's really good. And they will give you a 7, 8, 9, or maybe a 10.
Yeah, I agree. Looking back and circling back in your career beginning, you work with Anki, right? How was that, and what kind of knowledge and thoughts that you can share with us about that time?
Well, I was there long. I was there for 8.5 years, and
Wow, that's a lot.
And the funny thing, maybe to tell, is that I worked in the office. And because before that I studied, and so I worked in the office and I did a lot of marketing and the management of a company called Anki Media. And we were actually the first ones that started with e-learning, or in other words, online training. I kind of developed that for her, but that's a long time ago. Now it's very old-fashioned, I know that. But
The internet was certainly different, right? The internet connection, so it's a lot of
yeah. So, but in the meantime, also, when I trained with Chef, her husband, and my horse was stabled there, and I had quite a few students from abroad that trained for example, the Asian Games. You can compare that with the Pan American Games, and also like para riders and Grand Prix riders from the world. And what I learned the most there is to keep things simple. So if you want to explain your horse something, then explain it clear but in a friendly and a calm way. And do not start fighting, because that doesn't work. So whenever you lose your patience, you do something wrong. And that's something that Chef has taught me over and over again. He said, if you ask something from a horse, keep the aids simple. So make sure that you tell them it's either left or right. It's on 2 reins. And straightforward, for example, or you go forward or not, and then from that you can simplify everything. I mean, then you can bend and do lateral work, or you can ride a corner, or well, there's lots of things. And if you simplify it, then the horse can understand it easier. And and if you stay calm and you wait for the horse to respond, and he does it well, then you also have time to say that he did it well. And otherwise, you start working. And when you start working, you often forget to praise your horse. And well, that's something that I always remembered. So, well, if I realized that my horse is doing something well, and especially on something that felt quite simple, I always tell him he was good.
And how do you tell that? Like using your voice or touching the horse? How do you do that?
Can be anything, but well, he always taught me like, using your voice is the simplest aid, because then you don't need to break the contact. So, for example, if you write a test, you can easily say like, "Oh, good boy," or something. If you do it in a low voice and you don't do it very loud, then those judges don't hear it. Yeah. And I think that also gives some continuity, yeah, something like that, in your riding. Because whenever you go walk after something went well, and you give long rein and you pat him like, good, then you have to start all over again. And and often like just soften. I love to ride without hands. That's also because of my para riders. I want to be able to just sit there and do nothing, but just releasing the contact a little bit. And then at the same time saying, good, that you feel the relaxation and the energy going through the body. That's such a nice feeling.
Yeah, that's true. And my last question is regarding what's your plan right now? I mean, we have a difficult year. How do you spend your quarantine? What do you plan to do in this year, 2020, and over the next year? How did you accommodate all your plans?
Well, yeah, this year we got a bit more family time.
Yeah.
Yeah, in the weekends, and over here the situation is a bit different from Brazil. I'm still able, well, I think you guys can also still go to the stable and ride your horse. But we have less cases. So also competitions have started again here, but then, for example, with only a few people in the audience, or in the beginning with no audience. And so this year was for me like focus on training. Focus on those little things that I wanted to improve, because now you don't need to work from competition to competition, but you can just basically focus on those little things that you finally have time for. And that's nice. And then the second thing, for example, is we need to reschedule everything. Also with the para riders, we need to, well, maintain the rides of our horses. That was also a thing for me, because I had planned to qualify hopefully for the Olympics as well. I also had to talk with the co-owners of my horse if they were willing to keep him for another year. Thank God they are. So I can
Oh,
also
but
train
you
up
also
to
have
next
more
year.
time, right? You were
Yeah,
saying that,
exactly.
yeah, it's
Yeah, well, he's
to
only like just turned 9, so he's very young. He made his Grand Prix debut when he was 8. And so now I got time to take it easy, and yeah, so that gives me a very good feeling. And yeah, so next year we just start from scratch. For me, it's very important is to keep everybody motivated, because if people lose their faith, if the Olympics and the Paralympics are going to happen, well, if you lose your faith for a month or a week, then that week you did not focus on what your main goal is. And no matter if that week or month is something that you plan to relax or to train hard, well, it takes you off your focus. And keeping focus is the most important thing.
yeah, sure. And we are not certain about if Olympics are going to happen or not. So I don't know, the best thing is to keep working, right? And I don't know, do you have any CDIs schedule? I mean, you should have a plan about how to get those and how to qualify to the Dutch team.
Yeah, like at the moment, in Europe, the CDRs are starting up again. For myself, I had planned to start competing like either in autumn or winter. So over here, that's like September, October, November. And so I've got time still. It's only the beginning of July. So I started with some well, national competitions, big national competitions, to see where we're at. And for Paralympics, it's a bit more complicated, because all these competitions, the international competitions that were scheduled, are all scheduled up towards the Paralympics. And after that, there's nothing until March. So now there's like a big gap for everybody. And I think from maybe there will be 1 or 2 in the meantime, but then it's winter here and not many people compete. Yeah, so I think it will all start in March again. And yeah, then we need to organize our qualifiers and make sure that everybody's ready in time. And the same thing for me. Yeah.
Yeah, I think everybody kept on hold, and they are rescheduling everything right now because there was nothing to do during the quarantine. I mean, just training, but
Yeah, luckily training, because like there is
yeah.
some countries where you could not even go to your horse.
Well, so
Yeah.
I'd like to thank you a lot for taking the time to talk with Adestramento Brasil. It was a pleasure to get to know you and to get to know your knowledge and sharing your thought. And thank you a lot again.
You're very welcome. Very welcome. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Bom, muito obrigada a todos que acompanharam. Eu sou Roberta Prescott, te acompanho todas as notícias em adestramentobrasil.com. Até a próxima.